Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for being here with us on this Wednesday. We're going to do it again, 2 hours of open forum. That's right. We didn't feel like you got enough open forum yesterday, so we're doing it again, this time with Joe Heschmeyer. Bring it. You got questions about the Catholic faith? We'd love to hear them. 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. And remember, you don't have to be Catholic. You don't have to be Christian. You don't have to be a believer of any sort, or you can be a believer of any sort and ask whatever your question is about the Catholic faith. Maybe it's a question about the moral teachings of the church. Maybe it's a question about the sacraments of the church. Or it could be on our favorite topic. And if you don't know our favorite topic, you can call and ask what our favorite topic is. It's Jesus. Okay, it's Jesus. I'm just going to say it. 888-318-7884. Joe Heschmeyer, apologist here at Catholic Answers, wonderful writer, and a very fine person who everybody knows I get along with great. Hi, Joe.
That didn't sound sarcastic at all, Si.
No, we did. Yeah.
Good to hear from you, too.
It was nice to see you on the weekend.
Yeah, we were down in Fort Worth together, and people got to see us interact in person. And at least one person was like, "You guys are just like this all the time."
I know.
I think that was a compliment. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they meant you guys are.
No, I don't think it was a compliment. I don't know about that. I know there were some people who rode in elevators with us who were like, "Oh, this is great," but they didn't seem to mean it. They didn't seem to think that it was fun. The banter, as we call it.
Exactly.
888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. Let me ask you something, okay? Because you're not as old as me, but you're not as young as some of the people here at Catholic Answers. And while we're waiting to get some calls.
All of this is true.
Okay, so I got invited to somebody's wedding here at Catholic Answers, and I won't name the person, but it's Edgar. And it said to RSVP, so here's how I RSVP'd. I saw Edgar, and I said, my wife and I are coming to your wedding. And he goes, you're supposed to go to the website and tell me that. And I'm like, I'm talking to you like a person, face to face. Like, why is that not? And then I asked some of the young people here, and they were offended that I didn't answer at the website. Like that I'm supposed to go to the website and properly RSVP there.
I mean, have you thought about the fact it's a 4-letter French acronym? I mean, what you're doing is a very casual American thing, and nothing about weddings are supposed to be casual. Weddings are supposed to be super expensive and stressful, so that the couple can start in a lot of debt and stress. It's a fun way we test marriages.
Well, that doesn't sound fun. When you say it, it doesn't sound fun. No, okay, so you're of the view that I should have gone to the website, that it was more that I was somehow morally
the idea
deficient.
That we're going to expect Edgar to keep track of every person who approaches him and says,
I can't believe what a bad person I am.
I'm coming with my wife and 3 people I'm going to bring with me that weren't actually invited, but I'm going to bring them anyway, whatever you're doing.
Well, Mary Vasillo agrees with you, but her father, who's a very old man, is in the studio with us. And you agree with me, John? Or do you think I got to go? Yeah, John agrees with me. You can just say to a person, I'm coming to your wedding. Everybody that's under the age of 40 thinks that's the most horrible thing that you didn't go to the website and respond.
This is why you only get invited to like one wedding every 5 years.
Oh, really? You think that's why I haven't been invited?
I mean, maybe one of the reasons. That's probably not fair. There's probably plenty of reasons.
Probably not a lot of. There's not a lot of people my age getting married. All right?
That's
not a big thing. True. All right, so I've been chastised and corrected. I apologize, Edgar.
I will say this. One of the surprises I had in preparing for a wedding is just how much more you pay for everything in a wedding. Like when I found out how much it was to send out the invitations, I thought, I have paper at home. I could just write these myself.
I know. It's insane. You know what it reminds me of? My father is a doctor, and one time I was at his office, and his partner, he goes, look at that light. And I looked at the light, and he goes, this is back in the 70s probably. How much do you think that is? And then he told me it was thousands of dollars for the light. And I said, why? Is it like built special? And he goes, no, because it says medical on the side of it. And everything that says medical, that's the way it is with weddings. Like, that's not the normal amount things cost.
Medical stuff, and if you're inside an amusement park, those 4 things, what they have in common is more.
Did you mention airports? Airports too have their own economy.
Airplanes, it's like $8 for 40 minutes of internet. You're just like, it cannot be what that costs you.
I have a smart aleck thing I do at airports because I always get a Diet Coke for the flight, and it's always like $5. And so I go up and I go to the very nice person there. How much is this? And they'll be like $5. And I'll go, that seems fair. And they laugh every time. They laugh every time, like, because it's not fair.
No.
But it's not their fault. They didn't do it. 888-318-7884, the number. It's open forum. Ask whatever you, excuse me, I beg your pardon. Ask whatever you like about the Catholic faith. 888-318-7884. Joe, I'm about to go to the phones. Are you ready? You feel ready to go to the phones? All right. Let's go to, right up the street, Orange County. Dana is in Orange County listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Dana, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone, and thanks for the call. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Yeah, sorry, I had a similar experience with not understanding modern internet etiquette as your RSVP for a wedding, but I got schooled up by my kids for calling them without sending a text message first, which apparently you're never supposed to do.
What are you, a maniac? Just calling people on the phone? What are you insane? Yeah, I know. You got to learn these new things.
Yeah, anyway, so that caused me a little bit of a chuckle. Well, listen, thanks for having me. Listen, it seems like it's the political du jour thing to ban books, and then we've always been critical of Muslims because the Prophet Muhammad apparently was having a sexual relationship with a bunch of young girls. But the state of Utah recently banned the Bible, and I really was wondering when this was going to happen, because some of the stories I'll speak about, Ezekiel chapter 16 specifically, has God doing the same thing that Muhammad was doing, and that he's in this, and I completely understand it's an allegory, not an actual historical event, but it is an allegory representing the sins of Jerusalem, but it quite clearly has God entering a relationship, a sexual marriage relationship with a pubescent girl. He specifically comments on the development of her breasts and the growth of her pubic hair, and the marriage in the allegory is considered to be legitimate. It's not until the girl becomes kind of an adulterous prostitute, and she starts creating idols with the silver and gold jewelry that God has gave her, that the sinful allegory starts in reference to sins of Jerusalem.
So,
and it's fair to state that God's
Wait, I just want to get clear. So I maybe misunderstood what you're. So you're saying that Utah did the right thing in banning the Bible?
What? Yeah. Well, I guess
I'm categorically opposed to banning any books. So no, I think they were wrong to ban the Bible, but I also think people are wrong to ban, books that are talking about critical race theory or transgender ideology or whatever you have.
Gotcha.
But my point is that the Bible is worse than all these things. I would even challenge you, read this out loud to your Catholic audience now. Chapter 16 of Ezekiel, it's basically the whole chapter.
Let's unpack a couple different things here, because I think you're raising some valid kind of questions or points. The first is, what do we mean by book banning? Because I think most people would say it would be horribly inappropriate to hand hardcore pornography to a child. Whatever their opinion is about adults consuming that, most people would say this is a serious abuse of a child. And if you put that in written rather than visual form, I think most people still have the good sense to say that's obviously not okay. So book banning is a term that is almost always inaccurate. What's usually meant is we don't put in the school library certain books that aren't appropriate for kids. And of course we don't. There's all sorts of books that have no place there. Books about how to make drugs or bombs, books with really graphic sexual things that are not intended for kids. It's just baffling that things that you would be arrested for telling a child, you can give it to a child in book form, and then people will defend it because it's written on paper. That makes no sense to me. Now, I understand an actual book ban would be no one is allowed to read this book. This book cannot be sold. There's nothing like that. In fact, in these places, kids can still go and buy these horrible books in most of the instances, or at least not like the laws in question have nothing to do with the ability of a child to buy, inappropriate material for themselves. We're just not going to readily supply it in libraries and in schools, which seems obviously correct. My book's not in the local library. That doesn't mean the library has banned my book. there's a finite quantity of books in any given library. So why not have books that are actually good rather than ones that are filthy? So that's the first thing. Is like, I think the absolutist position on book banning is totally naive and has just not considered the reality, and is also misusing the phrase book banning in a way that's disingenuous. That if you actually say, what should we have in an elementary school library? That's a different question that, because again, 99% of books are not going to make that cut. They just physically can't make it into the library. But that doesn't mean you're banning those books. Kids can go get them on their own. We're just not having the government pay to have them at ready availability in a local school or library. That's the first thing. Second thing is this Utah law that it wasn't the entire state of Utah banned the Bible. And it wasn't, again, not really a literal ban. But one local district in Utah forbade the Bible in schools on account of it violating Utah's law about indecent public displays. Now, there's two things to know. First, that's okay if you're talking about particular passages that would not be appropriate. Like, I agree that a child should not be reading a sexually graphic allegory. Even if the allegory is good and holy, it's not intended for kids. In the same way that I'm not going to play, the movie The Passion of the Christ for my 3-year-old. It's too violent. A major part of parenting, a major part of teaching is finding an age-appropriate way of communicating things, whether we're talking about religion, whether we're talking about sex education, whether we're talking about any of these things. And so to pretend like parents and educators don't have the moral duty to do that and to do it well is, I think, naive and really dangerous to the next generation. The last thing, under the law, I should be really clear, the Utah law on indecent public displays includes an explicit exception for any materials which, when taken as a whole, has serious value for minors. So it's intended to make sure that there's no inadvertent application where, a good book is left off for some reason. So I don't know if that helps at all, but all that's to say, it's not, you don't need to actually ban the Bible. You can just say, don't read this chapter to your kindergartners. You can tell them about Adam and Eve. You don't tell them about Ezekiel 16. I don't know if that helps at all, but all this whole conversation, we're having it at such a basic and unnuanced kind of level that I think it's worth stepping up our nuance.
I'm going to leave it there because we have to go to the break. I just do want to clarify one thing. Despite being quite explicit, that passage in Ezekiel does not include intercourse. And so that is not true that it includes intercourse. Right. It's a quite graphic description, but it's not of that kind of relationship. Also, I kind of think they should ban the Bible for teenagers because
then
what would happen. You know what would happen. Tell them they can't read it.
If you were to donate really racist books to your local library, I don't think they would have any problem telling you we don't want to stock those.
No, of course not. Of course not.
And I think that's fine.
Right.
Every library has to make those decisions.
Okay, that does bring us well past where we're supposed to take the break, though. Dana, thanks for the call. We'll take a quick break. Be right back with more Open Forum with Joe Heschmeyer right after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you ready to spread your wings? Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with exclusive news, program information, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. To sign up, go to EWTN.com, click subscribe, enter your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. Get your wings today. It's the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. It's Open Forum. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. And there's like about 1 million people on the phones. So back we go to the phones. Luke is in Athens, Greece. That's cool. I don't remember having a call from Athens before. I'm so glad you're here, Luke, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app in Athens. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Okay, so I'm here visiting Athens with some friends, and we've been visiting some Greek Orthodox churches, and we're wondering what's the church's relations with the Greek Orthodox, because I was told it was different from the Eastern, and like what are some important theological differences?
You're saying that it's different than the Eastern Orthodox?
Yeah, I don't know, but like I was informed that there was a difference from the Eastern relation to the church and compared to the Greek relation to the church.
Yeah. So broadly, when we're talking about Eastern Orthodoxy, we mean the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Byzantine Orthodox, or Constantinopolitan Orthodox, and other like various Orthodox. Like a lot of the Orthodox churches are tied to particular nations. So like Ukraine has 3 different Orthodox churches. Estonia has their own Orthodox church, if memory serves. And so Eastern Orthodoxy is kind of the umbrella term for those what are called autocephalous churches, meaning self-governing churches. And some of them are more open to relationships with the Catholic Church, and some of them are less so. So the Russian Orthodox Church tends to be very skeptical of any kind of ecumenical relationship with the Catholic Church, whereas the Byzantines tend to be much more open. So the theological differences are the same. Whoever we're talking to, the particular history of kind of relationships with the West can sometimes be complicated, and the different people who are kind of in charge. So it's just as in the United States or in the Catholic Church more broadly, globally, you might have areas that are maybe more liberal or conservative. You have a similar kind of thing, although those aren't great terms, but you have a similar kind of thing where you go in Orthodoxy, you may have a different perception of the Catholic Church and a different degree of openness. In Greece, I know the Catholic Church has really tried to be as accommodating, as generous as possible. And one concrete example of that, there's only, I think, something like 2% of the population of Greece is Catholic. And so they follow the Orthodox calendar. So while the rest of the Catholic Church celebrates Easter on one day, it might be a week or 2 weeks or even later when the Greek Catholics do, because they're trying to celebrate it on the same day as Greek Orthodox, because they know there are a lot of people who have mixed families or marriages where one person's Orthodox and one's Catholic. And so to really, meet them 99% of the way. So that's, I don't know, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but that's kind of a general sketch of some of the kind of national level differences.
Luke, how's that?
That works great. Thank you.
Well, enjoy Athens.
Yeah.
We are.
We're all jealous of you. All right. Well, I hope we'll hear from you again. Luke, like I said, I think that might be the first time we've had a call from Athens, but
his English was great. I'm just kidding.
I know, for someone from from Athens. All right, let's go to Kevin in New York. Oh, no. Have you heard about New York? I got to ask Kevin about this. Have you heard about it, Joe?
I think I've heard of it before.
No, I mean, have you heard the news from New York?
I don't know. Is it that Josh Allen is going to be on the cover of the next Madden?
Oh my gosh! You need to pay attention
from New
to
York. This is a thing.
All right, let's go to
what else has happened in the news?
Kevin, are you breathing okay there in New York?
Yes, I'm breathing just fine. I'm actually out here working out, but you can kind of smell the smoke. I'm kind of concerned for my lungs. I'm not going to lie.
I've heard it's awful, but okay, I'm glad that you can at least get outside and work out.
What am I missing?
Wait, you haven't heard about this, Joe? There's this big... Canada is on fire.
Oh.
And then they're sending all their smoke down to us. And I say that like I'm blaming the Canadians, but frankly, yes, I am blaming the Canadians.
Build a wall.
but it's got to be tall enough to keep the smoke out. All right, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
Right.
Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Thank you. Hi. So I've had a discussion with like a Protestant before, and I was pointing at stuff like the apostles laying their hands and people receiving the Holy Spirit. Or in James 5:16, they'll anoint him with oil and his sins will be forgiven. And he'll say, well, those are temporary first century miracles to help the church grow, such as, Ananias dying in front of Peter. And last time I checked, someone didn't die when they lied to the Pope. So they're trying to group all those miraculous things together. And I'm trying to argue, well, no, some of them are sacraments, and they're going to be with us for 2,000 years. I guess what's the how can we tell from the text, and maybe also from the church fathers, but just from the text of, something's temporary and just for the first century to help the church grow, and something's just actually part of the church forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The first thing is just notice the context. So, for instance, there's no point where Jesus says, Peter, I promise anyone who ever lies to you will fall dead. It's a one-time event. It's not given even to the apostles permanently in the first century. It doesn't like that happens every time. So this is a clearly special kind of moment. I mean, that makes it sound more positive than it is, but it's a unique event. And so when you see a unique event like that, that's clearly not something being given in perpetuity at the command of the particular person. And so you look throughout the Old Testament and throughout the New Testament, and even in the age when miracles were much more common, it was not that every prophet performed the same miracles. They didn't. And many times the miracles they performed only happened once. And so when you see that, it's like, okay, well, that clearly is not something given in perpetuity. But there are other things that do seem like they are. So one of those is miracles broadly. In John chapter 14, verse 12, Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these he will do, because I go to the Father. That's not just a promise for the first century. That's a promise, in an enduring promise, of the kind of works that Jesus performs. And so a lot of those are things that are invisible, this salvation of souls. There's something miraculous, something supernatural about that. And we continue to see that in the life of the church. But it also includes some kind of visible miracles. And Jesus doesn't specify what that includes, but it's very clear that the kind of works he does include physical miracles. Now, you jump forward to John 20 when he breathes on the apostles. He says, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I send you. And when he said this, he breathed on them and said to them, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. And then you tie that to James 5, where it talks about confessing your sins and calling the priests or the elders and having them pray with you and having your sins forgiven. Like, all of this language clearly points to something that is not just a one-off kind of event. It looks like something enduring. And so I would say within the text itself, you have a clear distinction. Now, sometimes it's true. You look at a passage and you say, I cannot tell from the Bible alone whether this is a gift just for the first century or whether this is enduring. And that's where you look at things like church history, and that's where you look at things like the role of the church in understanding the Bible. Like, all your friend has proven is, left with the Bible alone, there's a lot of stuff we wouldn't be able to figure out. But that's why that would not be a good methodology to use.
Okay, so does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Kevin. All right. Well, best of luck with the smoke as well. I remember, man, years ago when we had those big fires here in San Diego, Joe, and we lived under that smoke, it's miserable. It is miserable. You can't get away from it. Let's go to Minnesota. Ben in Minnesota, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Ben, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Cy.
Hi, Ben.
So I'm a Lutheran, and I'm trying to get a better understanding of how the sacraments work in the early church.
Oh, good
So
question.
I heard.
Wait, what happened? Did we lose him? It just dropped. I don't.
Oh, it was such a good setup. He was getting
Oh,
ready
I
to ask a
know.
good question.
Hey, call right back.
Hey,
There's
Minnesota, feel free to call us back.
Yeah, 888-318-7884. Dial right now and we'll get you right back on, because there's two lines open and I have no clue what just happened. Somehow Canada did it. We're blaming everything on Canada today.
Yeah, I'm just saying, all these
That's what you get for living up near
Canadian smoke. Yeah.
Mitchell in Stevensport, Wisconsin. Oh, very near to Canada. Listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. You're next. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi. So my question deals with just how I should approach the nature of, like, the amount of penance, or what kind of penances I should do, especially when committing mortal sins. I've looked into kind of how the early church handled penance, and I know that it was, like, pretty extreme back then. And then I've also looked at, like, some of the penances that, for instance, Padre Pio would give to his penitents. And as someone who struggles with scrupulosity, I'm kind of always wondering if I'm doing enough penance. And I guess, sometimes I wonder, how does that all square with, mercy and moving on and things like that. And I guess I'm trying to just discern what kinds of penances would be appropriate when.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a couple of things that are bound up there, and I'm glad you gave me the context of struggling with scrupulosity. For people who aren't familiar with that, people who are scrupulous tend to worry more than they need to about the severity of sins, or that sense that there may be some sin going on. We are actually approaching the hard break, so I'm going to have to return to your question in just a minute. But if you stay on the line, I'll kind of unpack the history of penance and then maybe some practical advice about how to incorporate that into your own life.
Right back with more Open Forum with Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live. Are you ready to defend your faith in a world of unbelief? Join us at the 9th Annual Catholic Answers Apologetics Conference. This year's theme, I Believe in God. And it'll help you provide clear and charitable answers to atheism, agnosticism, and plain old indifference. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us in San Diego from September 21st through 24th as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Scott Hahn, and an all-star lineup of great Catholic speakers. Spend quality time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and enjoy 4 days of fun, fellowship, and adoration of the Almighty. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Enter promo code EARLY and save $50. That's CatholicAnswersConference.com.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Open Forum. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. I have been properly instructed on how to RSVP to a wedding invitation in the modern world. We dropped a call from Minnesota, but I really hope that caller will call back because it could have been us. I don't know. 888-318-7884. And right now, we're talking with Mitchell in Wisconsin about the harshness of the penances of the early church. Well, first of all, Joe, do I have that about right? Is that what we're talking about?
But yeah, so in the early church, penances were often pretty serious. And this continued into the Middle Ages, although there was a gradual kind of lightening of penances. So bear in mind, in the early church, being Christian was in many cases a functional death sentence. People knew that martyrdom was a real possibility, and they wanted to be really spiritually prepared so they wouldn't crack, they wouldn't give up under persecution, they wouldn't renounce the faith. And if they were caught unawares and died suddenly, they would go to heaven. And so they really approached this the way you might approach boot camp if you knew war was a possibility. And so that was kind of the approach the early church took. And that's beautiful and it's very good. But for many people, the kind of penances they were being called to, it was actually off-putting. And so you don't want to set the bar so high that people just avoid becoming Christian or they give up. And so there's a delicate balance there. And so in terms of penances, in terms of things that are kind of required, the bar is constantly going lower and lower. But in terms of what's called mortification, voluntary penance, it's still encouraged to shoot for the stars and really strive for holiness and strive for a real spirit of self-denial. So given that, I want to stress two things. Number one, in the fight against sin, what's called interior mortification is more important than any external act. That a repulsion at your sin, a turning away from your sin, a disgust at sin. And so if you can have that, that's really good. Not as a self-loathing, beating yourself up sort of thing, but as just a recognition, like, I don't want to sin. I don't want to live a life of sin. I have a hatred for sin. And that's good. That's better than, I prayed 10 Hail Marys because I had to. Like that. Hopefully it's clear. The external stuff is supposed to aid you in having a proper spirit of repentance and a spirit of contrition, and a spirit of also joy at being forgiven after you've received absolution. So that'd be one thing I would say. The second, in terms of the difficulties of a penance, it's really possible for exterior mortification and exterior penances to become a source of pride. I like to tell the story of a priest friend of mine from Virginia who, when he was in seminary, his spiritual director forbade him from giving anything up for Lent. And so he's in seminary. There's a lot of other seminarians there. There's kind of a striving to see who can have the most intense Lent. And so he's the only one having dessert. And he's the only one, doing all these things. And what it really was a mortification of his pride, that he couldn't show how tough he was and how, amazing he was. And as a result, I think he actually grew tremendously spiritually from that. And so let that be a guide. The temptation, particularly if you struggle with scrupulosity, is to perform these kind of really big external acts. But the saints are often, they point us in a different direction. I want to give you just one quote from St. Josemaria Escriva, the founder of Opus Dei. Now, Opus Dei is kind of famous for taking penance very seriously, but Josemaria said to bring out your spirit of mortification in those nice touches of charity. Eager to make the way of sanctity in the middle of the world attractive for everyone. Sometimes a smile can be the best proof of a spirit of penance. That learn to smile at people even when you don't feel like it. Learn to be charitable and gentle and all of those things and work on that rather than, how intense of a fast can I do? That'd be my recommendation. But then the final thing I'd say is the person who's best equipped to give you good counsel on penance and mortification is a spiritual director who knows you personally and knows your situation and all of your life circumstances. What do you think?
I think that definitely helps. I'm actually about to visit my spiritual director shortly. It's just hard sometimes because it almost feels like there's a contradiction almost between, well, not a contradiction, but like a hard thing to reconcile between like how quickly Jesus was to forgive certain people versus like, I don't know. I've always loved Padre Pio, but I've also kind of struggled with sometimes some of the stories about how he could be kind of harsh sometimes. And I know I don't know the context of those stories, but
different saints have different practices in the confessional, and different ages in the church you find different practices in the confessional. So St. Philip Neri would often have these kind of funny, unique penances. I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a story about someone who'd been gossiping, and he told her to cut open a pillow and let all the feathers fly out, and then gather them all up and put them back in. And of course, this is impossible. And his point was, and that's what happens when you besmirch someone's name with gossip. Like, you've done a damage by spreading this around that you can never really undo.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. But all that's to say, there's not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution to that. I don't think it's a contradiction, because even when Jesus says, go and sin no more, the people who follow after him, he tells really serious things too. Like, love me more than your family. And if you're not ready to give up house and home to follow me, you can't be my disciple. That kind of language of, if you're really going to follow Jesus, there's going to have to be a spirit of self-denial.
Mitchell, thanks very, very much. Of all that Joe said, one thing I'd like to second, get to know St. Philip Neri. Nothing bad ever came from getting to know St. Philip Neri, and almost everybody who knows him is happier because they knew him. So I'll just endorse that. He really is something special, isn't he, Joe?
He really is.
Yeah.
He lived across the street from the Venerable English College in Rome, and this is at a time when Queen Elizabeth was harshly cracking down on Catholics and killing priests, and so they were going to Rome to study, but they knew going back that there was a very high likelihood they were going to be martyred. And so he would greet them on the street and just say, "Hail, future martyrs."
He was a funny person.
He was a funny person. I mean, it was something beautiful about that. He was clearly respecting what they were doing, but also just reminding them of, don't forget you're getting ready to be martyred.
All right. Check him out. If you don't know, Philip Neri, the great saint, the great Catholic Reformation saint. Also, for those of you who are negative about the Jesuits, he refused to join the Jesuits. So that's something for you, for all you out there.
There you go.
Bill in Virginia, watching on YouTube, he loved the Jesuits, though. It wasn't that he didn't refuse because he didn't like them.
Was he refused or did he refuse? I think I'd heard the story the other way around.
Oh, I thought he told them.
I don't know. I don't know enough about his biography there. I vaguely remembered something where there was a conversation with him and I think Ignatius, but I don't remember the details. So I will defer to anyone who remembers the specifics there,
including me.
Possibly.
All right, Bill in Virginia, watching on YouTube. You are up next. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, I've got a question on indulgences. One comment. We had 9 people ordained this weekend.
Hey, congratulations.
Arlington, Virginia is like a low.
Of course.
But
one of my favorite stories. I went to a beautifully reverent mass, and I congratulated the priest and asked him why it was so reverent. It was I'll tell you, it was Our Lady of Angels in Woodbridge, Father Keith O'Hare. Oh. And afterwards he said, "Oh, well, you're in Arlington now." And it was just like, well, of course it's reverent. And he wasn't wrong. My experience of Arlington for the next 4 years or however long I lived there, it was beautiful. Masses were the norm.
Yeah, we've got
please go ahead.
And anyway, one comment before then. I was reading the bios of them. One of them credited Catholic Answers for part of his desire to be a priest.
Wow,
that's fantastic.
So read the bios in the Arlington diocese.
We should, we're in need of a chaplain, so we should maybe ring up the Diocese of Arlington and just propose, this guy's part ours. Yeah. I don't know if it works like that.
I don't.
But anyway, I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry.
That's okay. My question is, now my wife and I go to the first mass, and we try to go to the ordination, and we want plenary indulgences. Are those forever, or are they retro only, and every sin you commit afterwards you're going to pay for?
That's a good question. My understanding is that they are truly plenary. But to be honest with you, I've never heard that question specifically addressed. What is good is that a plenary indulgence can be offered for yourself or for a loved one, or for someone else. And so, if you got any question on this, just hey, I'll offer this one for you. When you die, you offer that one for me if I die first. You can grow in charity by helping one another out, so you don't have to worry about that. But for those who are listening, just so you know, for an indulgence to be plenary, you need to have an interior disposition of complete detachment from sin, even venial sin. And what that means is not that you're totally sinless or that you never sin again. What that means is that you're not keeping some sin away from God and saying, well, I want to hold on to this. Like, I want to hold on to this behavior in my life. You're actually surrendering yourself completely. If you don't have that, if you are only partially able to do that, you can still get a partial indulgence, but you're not going to get a plenary one. And then the other ones are easier to objectively determine. If you've sacramentally confessed your sins, if you've received the Eucharist, technically, you don't have to go to Mass. You need to receive the Eucharist, but Mass is typically what people do. And then you pray for the intentions of the Pope within a particular kind of time period. So, yeah, I would encourage people to take indulgences seriously, to offer them for the souls in purgatory and for loved ones. You can also offer them for yourself, but as I've sort of indicated, I think it's better to live a kind of life where people want to do that for you.
Well, we go every year, and we've covered most of our relatives. So
God bless you.
We do. But if you do it for yourself, I just wanted to know: is it prospective and retrospective, or retro only? And that was,
I would feel bad if I declared this more confidently than I feel. But my understanding is that it is just actually a plenary indulgence. That this is applying to both past and future remission of temporal sin, or the temporal consequence of sin. But I've never actually read anything on that specifically. So I'm open to correction on that. And I'll do a little bit of digging on that after the show.
Bill, we'll have to leave it there because we've got to take our break. Thank you very much for the call. It's open forum. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest, and we'll be right back with more of that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Experience the incredible story of the woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Born Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica grew up in a rough neighborhood in Canton, Ohio. Young Rita experienced abandonment, rejection, and heartache, but God touched her through a woman named Rhoda Wise. Encounter this amazing woman at the Mother Angelica Museum. Plan your visit today at motherangelicamuseum.com.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
I come from a family of 16. Ryan, Micah, Levi, Caleb, Noah, Titus, Timothy, Josiah, Elisha, Becca, Emma, Bethany, Hannah, Grace, Ruth, Christiana. I was really encouraged when I was listening to your radio station, and I just think everything you were saying was absolutely true. And I just thought I should call in and let you know that. And that there's still hope out there.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kelly, your host. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. Joe will be among the many, many fine speakers we have at our conference coming up September 21st through 24th in beautiful San Diego. And we'd love it if you'd come. Check it out, CatholicAnswersConference.com, CatholicAnswersConference.com. If you use the promo code EARLY, you save $50 on your ticket. What's the website, Joe?
CatholicAnswersConference.com.
I'm so proud of you.
I know.
So
I didn't
proud
say
of you.
CatholicAnswersPilgrimage.com, which is for a different thing.
Yeah. A lot of times if I ask you apologists what I just said, you don't know because you're reading ahead on the next question that you're
Or
about to
doing
guess.
just anything else. Just filling out
Just ignoring me. Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to Oklahoma.
Into space.
Yeah. Alyssa's,
There's a joke that oh, never mind. It's dumb. I'll skip.
I can't. It must be really dumb. If Joe Heschmeyer stopped himself, it must be really dumb. Alyssa,
the joke just goes. My wife says I don't listen, and I said that's a weird way to start a conversation.
That's not that bad. Alyssa in Oklahoma said, everybody that I know hates my favorite joke, Joe. I'll tell it to you later. But before the end of the show, I'll tell it to you.
I feel like
everybody
have to
I
tell
know.
at some point. We'll tell after Alyssa.
But we'll talk to Alyssa first. Yeah, and then I'll tell you my favorite joke that no one I've ever told it to likes.
Okay.
And I think it's hilarious. Alyssa in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, listening on Oklahoma Catholic Radio. I don't think I could say the word Oklahoma anymore. Alyssa, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. So it's my understanding that the Catholic Church recognizes the Orthodox Church's sacraments as valid. And if that's the case, why do we recognize them as having apostolic succession if that's what we do?
Yeah, we do.
And we don't
That part's
recognize
right.
Protestants as having it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because Protestants intentionally broke it. So the idea of apostolic succession is built on the idea that Christ founded a visible church and entrusted the leadership of that church to the apostles, who then entrusted it to the bishops, and that we can actually keep track of each generation of bishops and see the succession of them. And we see this attested to by the early Christians. Irenaeus talks about this in Book 3, Chapter 3 of Against Heresies in 180. And it's attested to by numerous others. Tertullian talks about it, and numerous others do. The reformers reject this. They say the true church is actually invisible. And there may be an overlap with the visible church, but they say, oh no, you have to be a part of the church, but the visible church isn't the church. And that justifies them going into schism and breaking away from the church. Because if they granted that the visible church was established by Christ and entrusted to the bishops and the successors of the bishops, then they couldn't say the Pope is the Antichrist for being one of the successors of the bishops. And so the reformers really intentionally and deliberately break apostolic succession. And that's where the problem comes in. It's a more complicated story with the Anglicans, because with the Anglicans, they just say, well, no, we as a visible church in England are going to break away from the Church of Rome. And they do this by legislative act, and all but one of the bishops go along with it. So they originally have apostolic succession. But then with the influence of Protestantism in England, they changed their rites of ordination to no longer recognize the kind of priesthood that had existed prior to that point. So they broke it, but much later in the game, and it's a more complicated story there. But that's the basic story of what happened.
But we do recognize that Orthodox have it.
Yep. Yeah, because they believe, Jesus established a visible church, and he entrusted it to the apostles, who entrusted it to their successors, and their bishops are among those successors. They are just not in union with the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. So it's a different, they don't undermine the idea of the visible church. They don't reject that. They believe in all of that stuff that Protestants deny.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that.
Thanks very much. It made me think about, Joe, I never thought about before while Alyssa was talking. Are there other churches besides the Orthodox Church? Like, I don't know, like maybe the old Catholic Church or others that I may not, that have kept apostolic succession?
There are.
Okay.
State of Acontis have, Polish National Catholic Church. I'm coming up short on the list, but there are several. The Oriental Orthodox, which are not quite the same as Eastern Orthodox, they broke off earlier.
Yeah.
So all of those, because they recognize the visible church, and usually when they broke off into schism, it was a local church broke off. It wasn't just a group of people following a charismatic leader like you see with Protestantism.
Right. So their bishop went with them, or their bishops went with them.
Right. Their bishop went with them and carried his authority as a bishop and said, I'm still a bishop, I'm just no longer in communion with Rome.
They should come back and we should all be one church again.
You know, it almost happened numerous times. The Coptic Church, that's another good example. So at the Council of Florence, the East and West sit down for a union conference. It's going really well. The Eastern Orthodox delegates agree to recognize the leadership of the Pope as head of the church, and they're going to come back. The Byzantine Emperor, who's a major player in the East, agrees. And then other groups start coming back and saying, we want to join if you're getting the band back together. And so like the Coptic Orthodox come back, the Armenians come back. And then it falls apart within about 100 years of the Council of Florence because a lot of people on the ground didn't actually want to be reunited as one church. But it is worth recognizing that, within about a century of the Reformation, there was a real chance we were going to be one church again, visibly, and until human sin kind of had the last word there.
Well, Alyssa, thank you again. I'm going to go to Salvatore in Las Vegas, Nevada. Listening on Catholic.com. Salvatore, go ahead with your question for Joe.
Oh, wait, you guys hear me right now?
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wait, were you thinking the phone was not going to work, Salvatore? You sound surprised that modern technology is effective.
No. Long story.
Oh, okay.
I'm just.
Well, we're glad to have you here.
Oh my God! Thank you so much. This is so cool. So my question has something to do with paganism. So I have a friend who came from the church and kind of left from it. And long story short, she's a Wiccan, and I kind of had a similar background, more of an atheist, onto now coming back to the traditional Catholic faith. And I have my own reasons, but I never really dwelt so much into paganism. So my question would be, what in your opinion, is the best argument against paganism, specifically Wiccans, if you know?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a very good question. So I would start with the basic theology that there's one God. There are other spiritual forces that are out there, angels and demons, but there's only one God. There's only one creator of all reality. And one of the ways we know that is there's a uniformity to reality. It looks like it has a single author. You know, if you've ever looked at something where a bunch of different hands have been in the pot, it's not uniform. But even at the scientific level, there's a structure to reality. There's a uniformity, things like the universal constant. All of this points to the oneness of creation and ultimately to the one God. Given that, if you're consulting with other spiritual forces, and God has been very clear not to do that, you're trying to go around God, the one all-powerful, almighty, all-good God, and going to people he warned you about. That's bad news. You know, if the God of the universe says don't practice witchcraft, which is what he says in Leviticus 19, verse 26, that makes it really clear that whoever you're talking to is someone God does not want you talking to. And he doesn't want you talking to them for your own good, because they don't mean good things for you. They might get you some cool stuff in the short term. They're spiritually grooming you, but they do not have good intentions for your soul.
Is that satisfying to you, Salvatore?
No, well, not really. Because
okay,
the
go
thing
ahead.
about
Yeah.
no, it's just a long story short again.
Okay.
Because I've had my own way and path of coming back to the faith, she asked questions about it, and I was able to talk to her about it. And again, long story short, she became a little bit more interested, but because unfortunately with her past, she's had some issues here and there, she kind of leans on these things. But as far as I see, and I don't speak on her behalf, I think it's with a mentality that not maybe necessarily that she believes that this exists, but more that she somewhat deludes herself that she does have any power of this because of this new age mentality.
Okay.
I've heard at least.
Yeah, no. A lot of people who mess around with spiritual forces tell themselves that it's just like catharsis or whatever. But it'd be like saying, you know, my friend takes meth, but she tells herself it's vitamins. Well, it doesn't matter the delusion you're telling yourself. The question is, what is actually happening? And if what's actually happening is you're tapping into dark, occult spiritual forces and asking them to do stuff for you and give you power, you're making an alliance with the enemies of God. And they will do tremendous damage to you, even if the whole time you're doing it, you're telling yourself that you're not doing that, you're doing some other thing. Like, even if you tell yourself you're just deluding yourself, the thing you're actually doing is real and dangerous. And so, yeah, I mean, she may not say, I want to make war with God. She may just say, I want to feel harmonious with nature and nature spirits and all of this stuff. But the end result is still the same if there's a deliberate action to consult with these spiritual forces.
Salvatore, I think your question is one that many people will want to hear the answer to, and I'm glad that you brought it up. I actually think maybe this should be the topic of a focus episode sometime.
Yeah, I
Joe,
think it should be.
Because I do think there are many people who practice Wicca, at least when I read what they write, who don't actually believe in personal gods, but they believe that they're accessing the divine somehow. You know, they'll talk about the divine, right. and so they know that the actual reference to the particular gods is not the thing that they're trying to achieve. What they're trying to get to is the divine, and they're doing it, as you said, in a way that goes through people and principalities that they should not be going through.
I frankly think in many cases, the genesis of it is wanting to be spiritual but not religious. You know, wanting to have a spirituality without having what's perceived as the rules or rigidity of having organized religion.
Oh, I didn't tell you my favorite joke, so I'll do it when we come back. All right, Joe?
Sounds good.
All right.
That'll keep people on through the break.
I know, especially because I told them that no one who's ever listened to me tell this joke thought it was funny. Every single person said, no, it's not funny. That's why nobody likes it. So we'll do that when we come back. But we'll look at that, every single line full. We didn't get our gentleman back from Minnesota, did we? He didn't call back? All right. If you're a person we have hung up on today, because there's only one of you out there in the state of Minnesota, call back. We want to talk with you. We didn't hang up on you on purpose. And if you are not in Minnesota, if you're anywhere else in the world, you can dial the same number, 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kelly, your host. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. It's open forum. We continue with the open forum. We've had awfully nice callers so far. So this would be a really good opportunity if you're not a nice caller to get on, because we've overdone the nice callers and we need some rotten mean callers. So if that's you and you want to
I got to warn you, Cy.
Yeah.
I see at least one solid nice caller in the mix. Sean from Fort Perry, Canada. The regular caller, he's also Canadian. You know he's nice.
Oh, he's probably going to be mean to me, though, because I said that Canada was sending all their smoke down to us. So
yeah, it's like we send lots of good things. Maple syrup?
Maple syrup, smoke.
Many of your best celebrities?
Yeah,
John Candy?
I know.
Alex, you're back?
Canada, just for John Candy. We should be eternally grateful to Canada.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies as a kid was Canadian Bacon, where he envisions Canada invading America or something. It's funnier.
No one's
because
ever
he's
heard of that
Canadian.
movie. You just don't talk about things nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, speaking of things nobody likes, hey, want to tell us about your terrible joke?
Oh, I will. I'll tell you my joke. All right. So it's actually a Norm Macdonald joke, and who's one of the funniest human beings that ever lived. But
your joke is not even your. Okay.
No, it's not my joke. But I heard Norm Macdonald tell it. But he used to make up bad jokes. Like he would write bad jokes on purpose, and it was funny when he would read them. But this one, I think, is the funniest thing I've ever heard. And everybody I tell it to says it's not funny at all. You should stop saying it. Are you ready?
Well, I'm bought in. Yeah.
All right.
Please.
Here's the entire joke. I wonder who's buried in the grave of the man who invented the old switcheroo.
That's a good joke. I'm sorry to say. I did not see that coming. That was a good.
I don't know why that makes me. I think that's so funny, and you're the only person who's ever laughed at it. You're my best friend now, Joe. You're my best friend. You know. Now you can't get out of it.
Unbeliever who's listening and saying Christians are so dumb.
But
no, it's these Christians are so dumb.
Yeah, no, there's lots of Christians with good taste and manners. Just our lack of them should not dissuade you from embracing the Christian faith.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
All right, enough of our address to unbelievers to start the show. The number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I forget what I was supposed to do. Did we finish that last call on Wiccans? We did. So I can go to another call now? Or was there something else you wanted to say about Wiccans?
I think so.
Okay. All right. No,
that's
all right.
We covered the basics. Don't be a witch.
Okay. All right. John in Albuquerque, New Mexico, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Thanks for the call, John. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Well, one, I'm a nice guy. Two, I thought the joke was very funny.
Yes! I am. All right, you're 2 for 2.
You know, just saying the second thing would have already shown the first one.
Yeah, right. Merciful anyway.
I have a lot of pity for unfunny people, but I really like your joke.
Well, I'm still laughing. So we have a Society of St. Pius X parish here in town. And as I understand it, not all, but some of the sacraments you receive there are considered valid, but they're all considered illicit. And I don't know the difference between being valid and yet being illicit.
Okay.
That's a good question. A valid sacrament means the sacrament actually happened. An invalid sacrament. So if you come over to my house and I'm saying, I'm going to celebrate Mass now, then I hand you bread and wine. I've only given you bread and wine because I cannot validly consecrate the Eucharist. And so that would not be valid. And it's not a question of just, it also is forbidden for me to try to. So it's also illicit, which just means forbidden. But a priest can validly consecrate the Eucharist. But in some circumstances, he's told not to, if it's not in full communion with the Catholic Church or, for various other reasons. In those situations, he's still a priest. He can validly do it. He's just not supposed to do it here. It sounds to many people like weird legalism, and I always point them to the same place. I point them to Numbers chapter 20. A little bit of context. The Israelites are in the desert, and there's not a lot of water in the desert. And so at one point, God has Moses strike a rock with the staff, and water comes out. But then they keep going in the desert. There's still not a lot of water in the desert. And so they're complaining about God. And God says to Moses, take the rod and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron, your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So he's very clear. Just speak to the rock. Show them that you don't even need the staff. You can just hold the staff and speak to the rock. And Moses is like, now I know hitting the rock works, but I don't trust God that I can just speak to the rock. And so he goes and he ignores the instructions. And instead he strikes the rock with the staff again. It was illicit. He did what he was forbidden to do. He did not do the thing he was told to do. He did a different thing instead. But remarkably, water still comes out. God still works through this miraculously. He then punishes Moses for his disobedience, but the Israelites are able to receive the water that they need. So that's the kind of distinction between a valid but illicit sacrament, is that God can still work through it to give people the graces that they need, but the person being disobedient is still punished for that.
So as a follow-on to that, if I attended Sunday Mass there, would that fulfill my Sunday obligation?
That's a good question. There is a little bit of ambiguity about this. My Archbishop just said yes, and so I feel comfortable with that. But you should ask your bishop. Having said that, he also said he discourages his people from doing it, and so I would respect that as well. So unless there was some situation where I couldn't attend any other Mass, where it's like, well, the roads are really bad for whatever reason, I live close to this SSPX church, that would be about the only circumstance I think I would do that in if I'm trying to fulfill my Sunday obligation. You should do it in a way the church encourages you to do it. Like you don't want to test the boundaries of obedience. That's not a good spiritual disposition, would be my suggestion. That even if you can get away with it, you don't want to get in the habit of saying, how far can I go without crossing the line?
John, I'm going to leave it there because as I've said, all the lines are full. So, and quite a few international calls coming up. So I'm going to keep moving. It's open forum. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. Thank you, John. Going to Manila, Philippines. James in the Philippines, watching on YouTube. I know there's probably more than one person named James in the Philippines, but is this our old friend, James?
This is the old friend, James. Hi.
Well, welcome back, James. We're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Joe. So my question so I've been reading the book of Job lately, and you know how difficult his situation is, was. Yes. But there are certain verses or chapters where Job expresses a desire to be hidden in God's cave until his anger subdues or to sleep. And so my question is I guess twofold. First, why should we believe that these verses in Job are incompatible with the idea of soul sleep? And secondly, how did people prior to Jesus or prior to the New Testament understand and expect eternal life?
That's a good question. So the first thing is there's a degree of successive revelation in regards to the afterlife. So when we say prior to Jesus, it depends a little bit when we're talking about. So in later parts of the Old Testament, the ones closer in time to Jesus, you have very clear proclamation of the resurrection of the dead and eternal life. For instance, in Daniel 12, it says that many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And that's very clear, right? That there will be a bodily resurrection. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. That's Daniel 12. But that's all later books. The earlier books are less clear about things like the resurrection and about the nature of eternal life. And this comes up in a really concrete way because there's a sect of Judaism, the Sadducees, who only accepted the first 5 books of the Bible. And so we're told in the New Testament that they don't believe in the resurrection. They don't, not just like they don't believe in Jesus' resurrection. They don't believe there will be a resurrection of the dead. Well, why not? Because they don't see it in the first 5 books of the Bible. Now, when they confront Jesus about this, he tells them they're ignorant of the scriptures, and he points to them from the Torah, the first 5 books, that God describes himself as God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he says, is he the God of the living or the dead? So that's the first thing. We should say there's no one answer to what did people know and when, because God was revealing this in stages. And some people had a little bit of knowledge, and some people had more knowledge, depending on what century you're talking about and whether they listened to the later prophets. The second thing, in terms of soul sleep, there's a couple places I would look. One of those is in Luke 16, when you've got the rich man and Lazarus. And the rich man is in hell, or he's in a place of suffering. And Lazarus he's described as being in the bosom of Abraham. And both of them are depicted as very much awake. So even though we talk about the body sleeping and we say things like rest in peace, that resting does not mean that your soul loses awareness, because all of the depictions show the soul being fully aware. Think about the souls of the just underneath the altar in heaven, described in the book of Revelation, who are crying out for God's justice. They're aware of what's going on. When he says to the thief on the cross, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," that's a weird fulfillment if the thief is with him and has no idea he's in heaven because he's asleep the whole time. And so the idea of soul sleep that's kind of enjoyed a resurgence since the Reformation is not rooted in a good understanding of the Bible, because we can talk about you sleeping in the sense of bodily death and also being awake in the sense of the soul being united with God.
James, how's that?
Because your body and soul. That's I should mention that part explicitly. You are body and soul. And so if you focus just on the body's asleep, fine, but the soul's not.
Gotcha. Okay. That was very helpful. Thank you, guys.
All right. Enjoy your morning, James.
Thank you so much.
You see, Joe, because it's morning in Philippines. Did you not know that, Joe? How that works?
I struggle with the fact that you're in a different time zone than me. So it's very confusing. You know what I found myself doing a very silly overcorrection to this?
What?
When I was in Fort Worth, I kept thinking, okay, what time is it at home in Kansas City? Is this a good time to call? We're in the same time zone.
I do that when I go to Northern California sometimes. I'm like, okay, what time is it here in Northern California?
Do the math, carry the zero.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Right back with more Open Forum with Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features daily Mass, prayers, articles, and meditations in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church. On the web at magnificat.com.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
What have you always wanted to know about the Vatican? Well, I'm your Vatican insider, and I answer that question when I bring you the news about the Pope, Vatican City, and I share insights and stories from a broad spectrum of church ministries.
Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis, Saturday night, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Talking to old friends today on Catholic Answers Live. Several old friends have called, good friends. I don't mean old friends like they're old people. I just mean, people that we...
But they're getting older.
We're all getting older, Joe.
All are.
Let's go to Port Perry, Canada. Sean, listening on the machine that comes from Amazon that I no longer say on the air because it made a lady really mad that I said it one time, and I liked this lady, so I don't want to make her mad, but it's a machine.
Can you say it and then say, send PayPal $500 to Cy Kellett? Would that work?
No, because
I don't know.
That would be hilarious to me, but it's apparently not funny to the people who own the machine that has a lady's name and comes from Amazon. Hi, Sean from Port Perry.
Hello. You know all that smoke that you're getting from Canada?
Yeah.
Down in the United States? Did you know that we legalized marijuana a couple of years ago?
It makes sense now.
All right. It's all coming into focus at the same time that it's going out of focus, Sean.
Well done.
Thanks for the smoke, by the way.
I was going to make a maple syrup joke, but it was too sappy.
You're allowed to ignore him, Sean.
Okay.
We had a meeting and we agreed to that.
I was reminded by your discussion about the Council of Florence of what hopefulness there was for the complete reunion of all Christians in one church at that council, and how everything went pear-shaped afterwards. And it's related to my question because there have been a number of occasions in the history of the church where things really seem to be falling apart, or actually were falling apart, but somehow the church survived. And for the past couple of decades, church adherence and church attendance has just been falling. And the number of recruits to priesthood and religious life have been falling. And I just wonder if you see any sign of some kind of revitalization in the future, the way we've had several times in the past.
Yeah. So I think I want to divide that question maybe in two categories. First, what are the signs of life or the positive signs we see within Christianity? Since you mentioned Florence and unification of Christians. And the other would be just like people becoming Christian who aren't. I actually see a lot of positive signs in terms of Catholic Protestant and even Catholic Orthodox engagement, although I see it more, frankly, in Catholic Protestant engagement, that partly probably to the internet, certainly to things like the pro-life movement. Catholics and Protestants are often coming into encounter with one another in a way that hadn't happened in the past. And when you don't have any exposure to the group, it's easy for kind of falsehoods to set in. I heard a funny story about a Baptist who went to Russia, and he said when he told people he was Baptist, they asked him why he didn't believe in God, because they'd never met a non-Orthodox, and they just thought, and obviously that's not a good understanding of what Baptists believe. And likewise, there are a lot of falsehoods that float around about what Catholics believe in Protestant spheres. Actually, this coming Thursday, I've got a video coming out responding to a fellow by the name of Mike Gendron, who has 1 million YouTube views full of misrepresentation of the Catholic Church. He just constantly, but the beautiful thing about the internet is even though those falsehoods can spread, so can response videos, so can, corrections when people get things wrong, so that there's less vincible ignorance than there was in the past. Meaning, if people choose to be ignorant, they can, but they have more opportunities to not be ignorant if they want to avail themselves of them. That's a good sign. That's a good sign for atheists, a good sign for non-Catholic Christians, across the board. You can learn more things, and I'm seeing a greater understanding and appreciation of some of the Catholic distinctives. I'm seeing within Protestantism, in many corners, a desire for something a little liturgically richer than many people grew up with. And so they're looking for things like Lent and Advent and trying to recover the liturgical year. And so there is a hunger for a patrimony that had been lost and is now being recovered. So I see a lot of positive signs. I see many things like that are going on very well. In terms of the broader culture, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. Father Chris Check, or Father...
Paul Check?
Father Paul Check, thank you. Chris Check is not a priest as far as I know.
He's a father.
The
of 4
brother,
sons.
yeah, that's a good point. So Chris Check's brother, Father Paul Check, is fond of saying it's going to get darker before it gets pitch black. I understand the the kind of wry humor with that, but the truth is, as the culture gets crazier and crazier, so do the number of people who say something here has gone wrong. And when it becomes so self-evidently crazy, I think there's an opportunity for the church to kind of speak prophetically and boldly in that space. Whether we will or not is an undecided question. But the opportunity is to say, hi, the culture has gone off the rails here, and this is a real problem. I know, this isn't a Catholic thing specifically, although a Catholic made it, but Matt Walsh's movie, What is a Woman?, where he just asked people what a woman is. And one after another expert in the trans movement dodges the question, refuses to answer, or just calls the question rude. And it's really a remarkable emperor having no clothes kind of moment. And it has something like 175 million views last I saw, because Elon Musk shared it on Twitter and said parents need to watch this. And it was huge. It's massive. And this is in spite of every mainstream news organization refusing to review it or talk about it or engage with it in any critical kind of way. Just writing it off and hoping people won't know about it. So given all that, in spite of everything going wrong, I do see signs of life, and I do see the fact, it's like this. Last comment. I know I'm going long on this. You were made by God with a hunger that only he can satisfy. And that there is this hunger within you for truth, goodness, and beauty. And everyone has that. The person with whom you disagree the most has that. And we can ignore it. We can try to fill it in bad ways, but it's not going to go away until it's met in God. This is Augustine's beautiful insight in the Confessions. And so that is perennially true and gives us a great deal of hope, I think, that as the culture, it becomes increasingly obvious, has nothing to offer. Just nothing to offer our desire for truth, goodness, or beauty. No longer believes in truth, no longer believes in goodness, clearly no longer believes in beauty. I'm still hungry for those things. So where am I going to find that? And that's where we can step up as Christians.
Sean?
Yes.
Is that all right? That answer makes sense to you?
It's hopeful. I won't take up time responding because I know you have a lot of people waiting. Thanks, Joe. It's a hopeful insight that you have.
Thanks, Sean.
Good. Well, hopefully you're not too dour on it. I think we're called to be a people of hope, not naive like optimism, but of true hope to know that even in the darkest moments, God still is in control.
Sean, it's always great to talk with you, and we look forward to the next time, and thank you for the smoke. We're going back to Canada. Colin's in Canada, listening on Catholic.com. Big Canada hour this hour. Hi, Colin. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hi. First, I'd like to just say thanks to both of you for taking our question on Society 315 forum last week.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Glory, that was a lot of fun.
Wait, it was two of you, right?
Yeah, it was me and my wife.
I remember that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you did a good job.
He was judging your room. Do you remember that part? Did you want to respond to him? He made some comments about your room.
It's just that you asked a question about art, and the two of you were being filmed in front of a completely blank wall.
Because they wanted to know if they could get 3D printed art for their room.
But do you remember all of this, Colin?
Oh, yeah.
It didn't offend you, though. I don't think that offended you, did it?
I just wanted to stir the pot to find out.
No, Joe's trying to get you to be offended at something I said. And it's just hurtful. I'm getting a little emotional here, Colin. Go ahead with your question.
Anyway, I thought I'd ask another art question. This might be a bit uncultured, but I notice in a lot of Renaissance paintings, especially of biblical events, it's pretty common to see things that people might call anachronistic, like armor, weapons, clothing that wouldn't be invented for like centuries after the event being depicted. I guess my basic question is there sort of like an artistic purpose to those sorts of things? And if so, is that something that we can do today still with our current architecture, clothing, buildings, weapons, those kinds of things?
Yeah, this is a great question because it's true. Frequently, painters would set biblical scenes in like the local countryside with the clothes of the day in which they lived. So if you were living in central Italy in the 15th century and you're trying to depict the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary, you're going to depict the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary wearing 15th century Italian clothes with like the local hills in the background. And there's something really beautiful about that. And of course you see this across the board. If you go to China, Mary looks Chinese. And it's beautiful. There's something about that where it's a reminder that the biblical message, and particularly the incarnation, is not just for one time and one people, but for all times and all people. Nevertheless, it did happen in a particular place, in a particular time, to particular people. So there's also something good towards trying to depict things historically accurately. I think in a lot of cases in the kind of Renaissance and Middle Ages, trying to depict the first century historically accurately would have been an extremely difficult task for an ordinary painter. But there are stories of painters going to the Holy Land to get a sense of the local scenery to try to make it more historically accurate. A great example of an anachronistic moment, although maybe not technically anachronistic, is St. Paul falling from a horse. Well, in Europe, that's what you would ride to get from point A to point B. But more likely, if you're going from Jerusalem to Damascus, you're going to be on a camel, not on a horse. And, the Bible doesn't say which animal he was riding. But those kind of questions, if you're a European medieval painter, you probably aren't envisioning a camel and maybe can't paint a camel because you've never seen one. So I think there is a practical dimension. There's also a theological dimension, that there is a universality to the Judeo-Christian kind of message. But then the last part about, well, could we do that today then? Partly the answer is yes. I think the problem is that it comes off looking irreverent rather than timely and incarnational.
I gotta have to leave it right there. We're gonna take a break. Colin, thanks very much. It's open forum. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. All the lines full, so lots more questions to come right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest. 1 million people currently on the phone. So off we go to the phones. Josh is in Indianapolis, Indiana, watching on Twitch, that's really cool. Josh, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. So I was on TikTok and I saw this guy who was just, I would say, a Protestant giving an exorcism to some dude on the street. And I was like, man, he's just fooling a bunch of people. And I was in the comments trying to, have a debate about it. And I just want to know, I know that the authority was given to the apostles, which then was given to the successors of the apostles. But what's, a better way to, explain that, from Scripture and then through history of the church? Because I would explain it and then give them the Scripture, but they still wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple distinctions that should be made here. One is the office of exorcist, and the office of exorcist is governed by canon law. Canon 1172 says that no one can perform exorcisms legitimately upon the possessed unless he has obtained special and express permission from the local ordinary. That means the bishop, usually. And the bishop is only to give the permission to a priest who has piety, knowledge, prudence, and integrity of life. Now, why is that? Because you don't want regular people trying to go toe-to-toe with the devil and then it going badly very quickly. If you remember the story in Acts where someone tries to imitate the miraculous exorcisms that he's seeing, and the demon says, Paul, I know, you, I don't, and just torments him. Because it's like this guy had no authorization, no qualifications to do that. So there's an important sense in which the office of exorcist is sent out not just in his own private capacity as a person who's spiritually enlightened or something like this, but with the authority of the church. And the church is very strict about who it'll grant this authority to. Now, there's two other distinctions we need to make. One is that there is some history of lay exorcisms in the church itself. And so it's not unheard of in the past to have lay people performing exorcism. It is not seemingly something that one has to be a priest to perform an exorcism in the order of nature or in the order of like divine revelation, but that the church in her prudence is very careful about who she allows to be an exorcist, given the spiritual danger of giving someone, basically a giant spiritual weapon they don't know how to wield. So I would not go so far as to say it always has to have been a priest, because there does seem to be some evidence to the contrary. And then the last distinction is that there are what are called minor exorcisms as well as major exorcisms. You'll notice canon law is talking about an exorcism over the possessed. But technically, even like the rite of baptism has a minor exorcism, and those can be performed by the clergy or by the lay faithful. So there's actually an appendix in one of the sacramental books that includes a whole list of prayers that lay people can pray that are prayers of exorcism. But the rite of major exorcism can only be performed by a bishop or priest, and the priest needs special authorization to do it. The bishop can always do it. The priest needs the bishop's permission expressly to be able to do a major exorcism.
Got it. Okay.
And by the way, if you're trying to show this, a helpful case might be if someone is inclined to believe in such things. The USA Today story about the exorcism that happened in, I think it was Indiana. It was a Halloween story years ago. If you look up USA Today, Indiana exorcism case, it was a Protestant family. They went to the Protestants. They couldn't get the demons out of the house. They went to the priest. He tried minor exorcisms first, and it took the bishop authorizing him to do major exorcisms, and then the problem was solved.
Thanks, Josh. I'm going to keep moving because lots of folks on the line and lots of friends on the line, folks we have talked to regularly. Emma in Hayden, Idaho, one of those, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Welcome back, Emma.
Thank you, Cy. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
What happened to all the numerology stuff in the Bible that was so big in the 80s and the 90s? Did it just fizzle out? Is it real?
Ooh, tell me more of what you mean.
Oh, like the number of people's names, predicting things that could happen.
Yeah, like Bible codes, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, I remember as a kid, I was obsessed with Bible code stuff as a kid. This was, I think, much bigger in evangelical Protestantism. I never saw a Catholic book on this. I read multiple Protestant books on this, and I thought it was so cool. And then at some point, I think I realized, wow, I'm spending all this time reading these esoteric kind of codes about what the Bible words might mean if you arrange the letters every seventh letter, but I'm not just actually reading the Bible. And that's a problem, right? Like, that's something to watch out for. I think there's a couple things. First, there are numeric values to letters in Hebrew, and those numeric values can sometimes have a spiritual significance. There's one really clear instance of this. Revelation chapter 13, verse 18 says, "This calls for wisdom. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. That the 666 is the total. It's not like the popular imagination is like the devil's just going to have like 666, or the beast is going to have 666 on his forehead or something. And that misunderstands what's going on. He's saying, if you want to understand who I'm talking about, think about someone whose name, the Hebrew numeric value for it is 666. And that's Nero. His name in Hebrew, right. That's what it totals. So the fact that there can be a numeric value and that might be significant that's all true. What is really implausible and borders on esoteric and superstitious is the idea that there's like a hidden code that we need to like decipher and crack. And I would just say that's contrary to the whole Christian understanding of Revelation, because God hasn't really revealed himself if instead he's just sent Morse code or some really complicated code that takes 2,000 years to crack. The notion of revelation is that he's not sending an impossible or difficult to decipher code. We have to read with wisdom. We have to read with understanding. But it shouldn't be something where it takes 2,000 years for a popular author to say, maybe if we do every seventh letter, we can find these like phrases. The last thing is, people who defend Bible code and stuff will say, well, you couldn't do this with another work of equal size and have the same result. And that's actually not true. Someone took War and Peace, and they found if you take every seventh letter, occasionally they'll have these strings where it spells out words. Of course it does, because you're just taking these common letters used in whatever language you're reading, and occasionally it'll form words. It'd be like if you decided to read the leftmost letter on the page. If you do that and just scroll down, occasionally you'll be like, oh, look, that formed a word. And so I would be very skeptical of this. The methodology is also very sketchy. They'll change what number they're using and all of this to try to get the word to work. None of that there's no principled basis on which they're getting that. Like, it might be the seventh letter one day and then the seventh and then the 13th the next. For those who don't know Bible code, this probably all sounds insane. And it kind of, with the benefit of hindsight, I think it was insane. And so I think there's a reason evangelicals have also largely moved off of this, is that it has not proven accurate in predicting the future, and the methodology is so Gnostic rather than Christian.
Emma, is that all right?
Very good.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I can go to bed now.
Okay, good. Oh, that is good. You're going to stay up all night, huh?
I've been up all night worried about this question, so I'm going to
have
take
you
a nap
really?
now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's a nap at 5:30 in the afternoon, but yeah.
No, that's not a nap. That's just going to bed. That's just being
going to
old,
bed,
Emma.
but yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for the call. It does seem very much the most convincing thing. Well, not the most convincing thing, but the thing that strikes me about what you said is this just doesn't comport with the way God does things. It's not the God that we know in the person of Jesus, who would just be sneaky. He's not sneaking around trying to.
This is something the early Christians were actually really emphatic about, because the Gnostics were always talking about how, Jesus has one set of teaching for the public and another for his secret disciples.
Yeah.
And the Christian response is like, no, that's not true. When Jesus is arrested, he says, I was taught in the temple every day.
Yeah.
You know what I taught. Like, he's very clear. Like, my teaching was out in the open. And St. Paul, he says these things were not done in a corner. Right? Like, we don't need to go hunting, looking around for some secret theory to know what Christianity is all about.
No.
We can look to the largest church on earth publicly proclaiming these things, and a catechism is easily available. And, you've got 2,000 years of the largest church saying, here's what we believe and why. And you don't need to find somebody who's peddling, look, if you hold the Bible upside down and shake it, you can get these words to come out.
Thanks again, Emma. Thank you very, very much for that call and for that question. Let's go to Ricky in Bellevue, Nebraska, listening on Catholic.com. Ricky, thank you for waiting. Excuse me. Go ahead with your question for Joe.
Hey, guys. Thank you for taking my call. Joe, you may not remember it. A couple months ago, I got a chance to talk to you about the papal states in regards to military power. And I had asked you a question. My question was, if I became Catholic, could I reject just war theory? And you said yes, but you said there's good reasons to believe it. So my question today, in 5 minutes if you can, is kind of a two-parter. Number one, what reasons do you have for support of just war theory? And does just war theory contradict the Sermon on the Mount?
Beautiful. Ricky, I'm so grateful for that question.
Well-worded question. Everyone else listening, this is how you do it. No, I'm just kidding.
No, also, this is just so important for our time. I'm so glad that you asked that question, Ricky. Thank you.
I can't remember. I might have told you this last time, but an essay that's really helpful is by Elizabeth Anscombe, or G.E.M. Anscombe.
Yeah.
Gertrude Elizabeth Margaret, I think. Anscombe, called War and Murder. And her point is that if you say all killing is murder, if you say all war is unjust, you seem to be doing a good thing, right? You're setting the moral bar really high, but that invariably what's actually happening is you're making the moral bar unreachable. And then in those situations, people just end up acting really immorally because they've decided they can't act morally. Because you've made it so impossible for someone to live according to the gospel that now they're just like, okay, well, in that case, I'm just going to, everybody fails. If killing an animal is murder, and if you were to, like, hypothetically, right, if you took meat as murder very seriously and said, the prohibition against murder includes killing any animal or a bug hitting your windshield or any of these things, then people would just say, well, I can't live out that. So nobody's perfect. And then they would just go ahead with murder. But if instead you say, no, intentionally killing a human being is wrong, an innocent human being, like we have all these modifiers and caveats on it, because we want an absolute and universal rule. And that's only preserved by having a well-nuanced kind of rule. And so that's her point, that trying to go above and beyond the moral code of the Bible sounds noble, but invariably ends up being unworkable. And so you'll notice, for instance, in Luke chapter 3, soldiers approach John the Baptist, and he says, they say to him, what shall we do? And he says to them, rob no one by violence or by false accusation, and be content with your wages. He doesn't say it's immoral to serve in the army. There's none of that. Now, in light of the Sermon on the Mount, some Christians have voluntarily chosen for themselves to go above and beyond and say, I will personally embrace pacifism. If I'm attacked, I won't defend myself. If my house is robbed, I won't fight back. But you can't impose that kind of rule on anybody else. You can't force somebody else to that kind of non-Christian moral code, that kind of non-Christian standard. In the same way that you might say, I'm going to be celibate for the kingdom, but I can't force everybody else to say no one is allowed to get married. I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that help? You don't want to make the moral law unreachably high, and you don't want to bind things that Christ has loosened.
Ricky, what do you think?
Yeah, I do, and remember now, Joe, you brought up that Elizabeth Anscombe article, which I have yet to read, so I'll definitely have to take a look at that. I was wondering if I could maybe, I know you guys are pressed for time, but I was wondering if I could interact with you just for a second on that, Joe, if that's possible.
Sure. Yeah, but let's do this. Let's take the break, because I got to take the break. Okay. And so, but this is really important, and I want to come back to it. Can you just hang on 60 seconds or so, Ricky?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys.
Okay, good. We'll talk about war and peace from the Catholic perspective with Ricky and Joe right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN is everywhere. EWTN radio programming is provided free of charge to over 500 domestic and international AM and FM radio stations. It's a great teaching tool for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. For a complete list of EWTN AM and FM stations across America, visit EWTNradio.net. At the bottom of the page, click Affiliates. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Ricky, I want to just say something to you that I was saying to Joe at the break, that I sense in the Catholic community around the world, but particularly here in the United States, a growing discomfort with our kind of acceding to the various wars and the great amount of violence of the last couple decades. That there seems to be in the Catholic community a sense of, have we been following the gospel, or have we been kind of worldly in not objecting to some of the violence that's been done? Does that strike you as correct, what I'm saying, Ricky? Maybe you're also part of that reevaluation of the public use of violence, and that may be at the heart of some of your questioning?
Yeah, some of it. Most of it is just kind of studying the ante-Nicene Fathers and seeing a lot of evidence for what I would say is as pacifism in regards to joining the military and just killing in general.
Okay.
So that's why I'm kind of
Well, if I can maybe add a point on that, one of the controversies in the early church on joining the military is that they started to demand an oath to Caesar that treated him like God. So apart from the question of violence, there was a question about the military having become a tool of quashing Christianity.
Okay. Yeah. No, but yeah, to your point, Si, I think that does make sense. And I look at it as somebody that I want to take seriously the claims of the Sermon on the Mount in regards to kind of what Lewis said in regards to love, not affectionate feeling. It's being actually I think it was Aquinas that, it's the ultimate good that we can achieve for somebody as far as it can be obtained, kind of thing.
Well, I would just like to second your commitment to there's nothing that we believe, nothing that we undertake and call moral can conflict with the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is not optional. So it not just seriously, gravely, it requires our grave attention to what Jesus is giving us there morally. But you wanted to interact with Joe a little bit on the just war theory. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if I could just play the fence on one of the statements that you made, Joe, because I know it's common for a lot of people in regards to like John the Baptist or Jesus in regards to, soldiers coming to him and him not saying that, hey, being in the military is immoral or anything like that. So there's kind of an argument from silence, not saying it's a bad argument from silence, but argument from silence nonetheless. But I hear people on the opposite side, some of my pacifist friends, that will make the claim that, well, you don't have anywhere from Jesus where he tells a tax collector to stop cheating people out of their money, and you don't have him telling any prostitutes to stop hooking. So could the same?
Well, that's only sort of true. He tells the woman caught in adultery, "Go and sin no more." When Zacchaeus, the tax collector, comes to him, he promises to make amends. Jesus doesn't tell him to, but it's clear that there is a repentance from the action of defrauding. And when the soldiers come to John the Baptist, he does tell them not to defraud. So one could read this and clearly say prostitution and defrauding are obviously moral evils that aren't consistent with faithful discipleship. But you have not just silence with the centurion, you actually have in Matthew 8 him holding up the centurion as a model of faith. And Elizabeth Anscombe actually makes the same analogy your friends are making, but in the other direction, saying it would be hard to imagine him going to a madam of a brothel and saying what a model of faith this woman is. That this is not just a soldier, this is someone who commands soldiers. And yet Jesus is putting him up in Matthew 8, which doesn't seem consistent with the idea that Jesus was secretly a pacifist. He's certainly pro-peacemaking. He's also pro-mercy, but that doesn't mean that he would be against something like a criminal justice system.
Okay. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I'll definitely check out that. I take it that article's free online.
It is. I was able to find it in the course of our conversation on filledpapers.org. So hopefully you should be able to find it. If not, you've got the number, and I'd be happy to keep the conversation going. I think it's really good. Myself, I went through a period where I strongly leaned in a pacifist direction, and there are great figures in the church like Dorothy Day who have much stronger pacifistic leanings than I do today. So there's a lot of room for thought on this. I just want to make sure that wherever you end up for yourself, you don't end up in a place where you're judging other people for not living up to a moral code that isn't really in the Bible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. You've given me a lot to think about, so I appreciate that.
Ricky, you've given us a lot to think about, and again, I want to say I'm grateful to this. I often think we get calls on all kinds of things, but the big questions of Jesus and money and Jesus and violence that are so basic to his ministry, we often don't have the opportunity to talk about. So I value that opportunity. Anybody else that ever wants to call on those topics, I hope you'll find that you get a good reception here, because they're not so easy to answer, and they're very much worth considering if we want to truly be faithful to Jesus and what he's called us to. So call back anytime, Ricky. I am going to go now to, where am I supposed to go?
Harold in Maryland.
Did that just switch on me? Did you just switch that on me?
Yeah, I think I've got more time to answer his question.
Okay, Harold in Maryland.
I'm a little worried about the last two. They're
listening on that machine that you can get from Amazon. Go ahead with your question, Harold.
Yeah, sure, I guess. My question is in regards to the happy fault that we sing in the Easter liturgy. So I'm trying to figure this out. I have something of the answer in my mind, but I'm not sure. I just need some clarification. But what is it exactly that we had before the fall that we lost, that we gained even more than what we had? Like, would we?
Yeah.
What we lost, would we have gotten that before the fall? Would that God have given that to us before the fall? You know what I mean? Like, if it's a share in sanctifying grace, would He have given it to us anyway? If man hadn't fallen, would He have given us that? Or
it's a very, very good question that we have not been given an answer to. So the question is, if Adam and Eve had never sinned, would they still enjoy the divine life promised in the beatific vision? And we don't have a direct answer to that. We can say that Christ came into the world as a remedy for sin, because he's very clear about that. The Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. This is why he's here. He comes as the divine physician to seek the sick and the lost. And so we're able to proclaim in the Exultet at the beginning of the Easter Vigil, "O truly necessary sin of Adam, destroyed completely by the death of Christ. O happy fault that earned so great, so glorious a Redeemer." What we're saying is, because of our sin, God came into the world. So imagine, this is a silly analogy, but you might imagine a relationship where you have a fight and then you make up with each other and you end up even stronger than you were before. And so you say, "Oh, I'm really glad that happened," in a certain way. You're obviously not happy about like the worst of the fight, but you're happy that there was a process of healing and redemption. And so that's even more true at the divine level, that we're not happy with sin. We take very seriously St. Paul's claim in Romans 3 that where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And he points out that you don't want to then say sin is good. He says, why not do evil, that good may come, as some people slanderously charge us with saying. And then he says their condemnation is just. Like, we're not saying sin is good. We're saying, wow, even in the face of the worst things we ever did, God responded to that with an incredible outpouring of his mercy and grace. We don't have access to the world in which we didn't sin, and we don't know how he would have responded to Adam and Eve had they lived sinless, perfect life. But we do know what we experience if we live a holy life now in heaven through salvation is greater than anything Adam and Eve ever enjoyed in the Garden of Eden. Like, heaven is greater than the Garden of Eden. And we know that they were not owed heaven while they were in the Garden of Eden. So we don't know what would have happened to them because we never got there. But we do know that God has responded to sin by raising us to an even higher position than the spot we fell from.
I guess my problem is, my confusion is in regards to this theory that Christ would have come even if we had not fallen. It's like, I guess it's a Franciscan idea.
Bonaventure says that Christ would have come anyway because he would want, because in the incarnation, it's not just that Christ takes away sin, but there's a union of divinity and humanity that happens in the person of Jesus Christ. And we benefit from that union of humanity and divinity. And so the question is, like, what would happen if we hadn't fallen? And again, we don't know. So there's, C.S. Lewis explores this in his Space trilogy. I think it's the second of the three books. He imagines an unfallen world and then Christ coming to it. That's an interesting kind of hypothetical and thought experiment. But I want to really stress we don't have access to that world, which is why Aquinas and Bonaventure can disagree on the question and no one knows who's right.
Okay.
Harold, that does it for us. You could probably hear the music in the background. That means we have come to the end. What a sad time whenever you have to say goodbye to Joe Heschmeyer. What a sad time.
Oh,
thanks, Joe, for 2 great hours.
Yes, only too happy to join you guys.
All right. Well, tomorrow we got open forum again, right? It's like so much open forum. You can call and ask anything you want this week. And I'm pretty sure Jimmy will be here because it's Thursday. And Jimmy generally joins us on Thursday. So am I getting a nod? Yes. All right. We'll see Jimmy tomorrow. And we'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.